Everyone to our webinar. Welcome to our webinar today. There's people still kind of trickling in. Let me go ahead and announce our session. Leveraging sales managers as force multipliers, the power of organizational agility. We're thrilled that you joined us today for this exciting panel. Let me introduce you to the guests that we have today. I'm again Michelle Vazzana. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of VantagePoint. I'll be conducting the panel discussion. Joining me is Tarek Shuri. Tarek is Global Head of Recruiting Enablement at Talend. He's held that position for the past 2 years. Tarek is a graduate of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He's held key roles in technology and data companies in almost every area of marketing enablement over the last 25 years. During that time, he's also been an active student and practitioner of leadership, coaching, and performance development, both professionally and as a volunteer, working with college and high school age students. He recently created a new and original enablement tool, the Empathy Grid, which we're excited to hear about at some point, to help B2B sellers be more effective in personal interactions with clients across the sales cycle. Welcome, Tarek.
Thank you, Michelle.
We also have Jim Kennedy. Jim is the North American sales leader for Ball Horticulture, Ball Seed North American sales team. Ball serves greenhouse growers by building impact programs utilizing seeds, bulbs, and plants from suppliers around the world. Jim grew up in a family greenhouse business in New York State and has experience working with many aspects of the horticultural supply chain. Ball Seed is a global leader in the flower seed business. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Michelle. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you both here. So folks are probably wondering what we're going to cover today. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So we're going to cover some pretty relevant topics as it relates to leveraging sales managers as force multipliers, this whole idea of organizational agility. And we're going to examine elements of the engagements that we had with both Ball and with Talend. We're going to take a look at the primary drivers that would be addressed by equipping sales managers to better coach and manage. We're going to ask them how they selected a partner. Specifically, what was the criteria that they used to select that important partner to help drive sales management effectiveness? What are some of the critical success factors for their engagements with VantagePoint? Some of the hurdles that they experienced and how they navigated those hurdles. What kind of learnings took place that others should know about before attempting an engagement like this? And some of the key impacts and results that they realized due to this work. So pretty packed agenda. Before we dive into these specific questions, I wanted to take just a couple minutes to set the context for our conversation today. So you probably have heard of some of these books, Cracking the Sales Management Code and Crushing Quota. Those are the two bodies of work that form the basis for the work that we did with both Ball Horticulture and Talend. The Sales Agility Code, Deploy Situational Fluency to Win More Sales, is our newest piece of work. It's going to be published by McGraw-Hill in May of this year. It fits into this overall agility framework. Due to our research, we found that there really is levels of agility within the sales force. There's organizational agility, which is what we're talking about today, which is linking sales activities with organizational results. And the framework that both of these organizations utilized was the Sales Management Code. We also have situational sales agility, which is about buying situations and sales strategies. And finally, foundational agility, which is really more about buyer psychology and the buying journey. So the Sales Management Code that both of these organizations have experienced is the primary focus. And it's really around this decision-making framework, again, published in both Cracking the Sales Management Code and Crushing Quota. And this decision-making framework includes three primary elements. The first one is ensuring that seller activities are aligned to both organizational goals and marketplace realities. Ensuring that managers align their coaching to the most critical sales activities. And then monitoring leading indicators of progress to determine whether the right needles are moving in the right direction. So that is a little bit of context for our session today. And now I'm going to bring our panelists back up. So again, welcome, gentlemen. I wanted to go ahead and Jim, I'm actually going to start with you. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when you and I had one of our earlier discussions, about being involved in one of these webinars, I said, we're going to be conducting some discussions about sales agility, with the salespeople, as well as this organizational agility with the sales managers. What's your preference? You've done all of that. What's your preference? And you were very clear. You said, Michelle, I really want to talk about the work we do with sales managers because I felt that that was the most transformational. Maybe you could talk a little bit about why you felt that way and what some of the drivers were behind that.
Yeah, Michelle, a big driver for me and my response there had to do with leadership, because I do feel like the leadership kind of sets the tone for the organization on what direction we want to go. And what I found in engaging with VantagePoint on the sales management code is it brought a new way of thinking into our sales leaders. I'd come into my role as a sales manager, and I had 4 veterans on my team. All of them had been in the field sales force, were excellent salespeople who had all been promoted into sales leaders, and it had very little actual training in what does it mean to be a sales manager, other than just being an exceptional seller. And it was after this training that I actually had one of the team members. He was about a 35-year veteran of Ball, and he came up to me after the sales management code training, and he said it was the best training that he'd ever had at Ball to make him better at his job as a sales leader. He said it took it from a guy that was just brilliant at the art of sales, and it brought this principled approach to it. And there actually was a best way, and there actually was sort of a science behind being a sales leader. And there were principles that could be applied to make him a better leader and to bring out more from his team. And so it was that comment from that 35-year veteran that really brought it to life for me as how transformational this sales management code would be for our organization here at Ball.
Excellent. So let me just ask you a follow-up question though, Jim. We often hear that. We hear because when enablement and sales leaders bring up in, one of their biggest concerns is, our sales manager's been around for a long time. You can't really teach an old dog new tricks. They're going to be very resistant. And we know that sales managers are much more resistant than salespeople when it comes to training. So what do you think happened during that experience with that 35-year veteran that actually kind of turned him around?
Well, I think, Michelle, what turned it around for Jerry, his name is Jerry, and what good sales leaders want what's good for their team. And the leaders that I had were all very loyal to Ball, and they all really wanted what was best for their team. The field representatives, that they were the leaders, they wanted to help them drive their own incomes, to help drive their success. They wanted the success of their team. And what they saw in the sales management code was a roadmap to help their team members achieve greater success, to help them be the best they could be through leveraging this principled approach to coaching, to setting these goals, to help driving their activities, because they recognize that in our sales force, they don't like to have someone that's constantly monitoring or sort of micromanaging their situation. Right. And it was not at all in our culture, but what they saw through the sales management code, here's a way to actually coach, to be encouraging, to be kind of the wind at their back without feeling overbearing or counter to our culture here at Ball.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that explanation. By the way, I'm going to come to you, Tarek, in just a moment, but I wanted to just announce, and I know that Lisa and Michelle put this in the chat, but we're going to encourage questions as we go along. I'm not a very good multitasker, so Lisa and Michelle will be monitoring the chat. And please, if you have questions about the topic at hand, please ask them. We're going to encourage interaction. We want to encourage questions. We don't want you to wait to the end. You can if you like, but you don't have to. So, Jim, thank you. I'm going to go over and pivot to you, Tarek, and let's handle that sort of first primary question, which is, what were some of the major reasons or drivers that you decided to address the sales management and leadership population first, in your sales management efforts?
Well, first of all, I think what Jim articulated was an important driver of the program for us as well. And it's not, probably many others see that as well, right? Which is that sellers who are fantastic at their job and then are promoted into management need help to understand how to manage. All of those skills aren't the same skills that they need to manage. So I do think that is part of it. I also think that what motivated our managers and our organization was, quite honestly, an efficiency play. Managers had so much on their plate, and they spend obviously a huge amount of their time working with their teams. So if there's a promise that they could coach more effectively and efficiently, I think one of the things that's cool about this program is managers may actually spend less time coaching, but be more effective at it. I mean, it's not a promise. It may work differently in each organization, but at minimum, the time they do spend is going to be more consistent and more effective. But I think the strategically for us, thinking about what we were looking at just from an enablement perspective was, our organization was trying to go through change, as many are, to grow more effectively, to be more strategic. And to do that, you have to affect change across the seller population. The way we sort of look at things broadly is that there's sort of three phases to that change. And the first two, we think, we're pretty effective at, and many organizations are, right? How do you, spread the word and get people excited about it and motivated? How do you teach people how to do something? And I'm talking about sellers now, not managers. How do you teach them a new skill? Most of the times, it's the ways that you do that, the paths to do that are pretty well tread. The one that always seems to be extremely challenging is how do you get that to take on a day-to-day basis and get integrated with what they're doing? And in my opinion, by far the most effective and maybe the only true lever to do that is through your managers. So we felt like we love the approach that VPP put forward. Now I know we're going to talk more about that, but that idea that we're going to focus on the activities that the managers have a say in, right? What they're going to coach to. We're going to identify those things and we're going to focus only on those things because we think those have the biggest impact on results. There is a focus and a discipline to it, but it's also kind of freeing because it says to the managers, these are the things that you need to focus on and not this million other things. I think that's very appealing from the manager side.
This idea of prioritization, I can't overemphasize that. And I've heard in the last couple of weeks an opinion that there's a lot more to sales management than what you have in the sales management code. And my answer was, yeah, you're absolutely right, there is. So why do we focus only on these things that are in this framework? And the answer is because those are the ones that are going to give you the biggest lift, right? That's the everyday bread and butter of sales management. There's a lot of other ancillary things that sales managers need to be able to know and do. But if they don't do these things well, those other things aren't going to matter very much, right? So this is kind of the heart of what makes a sales manager successful. All right, we're going to stick with you, Tarek, on this next one. And you did select VantagePoint. We're very grateful for that. We've certainly enjoyed the relationship and the ongoing engagement that we have with you. But what were some of the criteria that you had in mind? Because I know that there's lots of people that are going to be either watching this webinar live or watching a replay who are thinking about enabling their sales managers and wondering, do I do a coaching program? Do I do situational leadership? What do I do? There's so many choices I have and so many vendors to choose from. What was important to you? And I'm going to come to you in just a minute, Jim, with the same question. What were some of the primary criteria that you had, and why did you have this criteria?
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting because when we select vendors or partners, I often remind my team that we need to follow the same practices that we preach with our sellers, right? So we tell them that, and it's well documented that in B2B selling today, that people buy relationships, not products. And there's a lot behind that, but I hope that resonates with some of the folks that are on today, listening today. So for me, selecting a vendor or partner should be a similar situation. It should be about someone that you can trust and you want to be in a relationship with. And for me, that's a couple of things. One is that I think what a person shows up with in terms of knowledge, expertise is important. A lot of people can opine on a bunch of different subjects, but two things that I like and resonate with a CRO about VPP, and I think the folks have already seen a little bit of that, is that a simple but powerful model that we can use consistently. You can't manage change across lots and lots of things. So this was a model that resonated. And secondly, backed by data. I think everything, quite frankly, that VPP does always starts with, a set of insights, data, work that's been done, which for us as a data company is extremely important. And so that's how we started the relationship. Tactically, I think it was also great and important that Michelle, you personally came in and spoke at a sales kickoff at a sales manager meeting, because it does take some time for people to warm up, get comfortable with what it is going to happen. So I think those things, but I would also just say in building the relationship, showing up at every engagement. And I mean, again, these things sound simple, but they're what we preach to our sellers, and they're powerful. And the fact that for me, VPP always shows up prepared and thinking about the Talend business, right? Relating the things that we're talking about to the Talend business. And it sounds, one other thing I'll say is those things might sound an opposite to each other, right? There's a standard model, but you're showing up for Talend. Yes, there is a standard, simple, powerful model, but how it gets implemented, the challenges you're going to face, the success factors, as we'll talk about, those things are going to be different for everybody. So there does have to be that element of consultantship and partnership to talk about what it's going to mean for Talend. So I think those are the ingredients that separated VPP from other vendors that we talked to. And let me tell you, in 25 years, I have worked with so many different vendors and partners, just like I'm sure Jim has, and just like other people have. I've hired tons of people. You know very quickly whether someone has those qualities or not. And I just try to shortcut the long processes now, right? Like, does the partner have these ingredients or not? And I'm very pleased with those qualities that VPP has.
Thanks, Mark. I have one other comment. As I spoke with some other staff members, Tarek, about this engagement in preparation for this webinar, and one of the comments, and this might, I don't know if this is going to be true for you, Jim, or not, but one of the criteria that was also shared was this whole idea that this framework is methodology agnostic. It's not aligned with, a certain sales model. It can blend with anything. Was that also, Jim, important to you? I mean, tell me a little bit about your criteria and how it's similar or different than Tarek's.
Yeah, the fact that it complemented our go-to-market and our approach as sales strategy, it did complement that. That was important to me at the time that we first made that decision. With a background as a greenhouse grower, when you grow plants, you study, okay, what's the best way to grow this plant?
Mm-hmm.
What's the science behind growing this plant? What temperatures will it respond to? What light levels? What conditions does it prefer most? And so there's a scientific methodology to growing plants. And coming from that plant growing background into sales, I was looking for something similar in a sales training where it would be based on science. Okay. And so I was interested in what are the best sales leaders do? And in that, really seeking out what do the best sales leaders do is when I came across the team from VantagePoint. And that's what led to the engagement, because it was based on science and it was based on what best sales leaders do. And I wanted to become a good sales leader. So I followed that path naturally to try and pursue that. What do the best do? Yeah. And then also that the complementary nature to our team is veteran team, they're independent team, and they know what they're doing. And so you're coming in there trying to say, okay, well, who's this kind of young guy coming in, tell us how to do our thing. They don't need to be told how to do their job. They're already very successful at it. And what I found is that this approach through VantagePoint helped us to help them to be the best they could be. It just helped draw out their strengths. It helped set goals for them and help them to achieve those goals in a way that it rewarded their own efforts, and it doesn't come across as too overbearing. So I did find that complementarity with our approach to be really important to me.
So let's talk about that for just a minute, because I think that although that's not necessarily a big key part of the engagement, it is part of the program that managers go through, this idea of a minimum effective dose, right? Because a lot of programs out there are very over-engineered, right? They try to do everything and don't necessarily do anything well. They just do a lot of things. And this program focuses on a few key things, and some of it's really counterintuitive. Like when I did the research, I fully thought that the most successful sales managers would coach for more hours per month than the less successful sales managers. That was not the case. And I had lots of other hypotheses like that that didn't turn out to be accurate, which meant we had to really kind of dig beneath the surface. And one of the key themes that came out is the best sales managers are not necessarily working harder than everyone else. They're just working smarter. They're maniacal about prioritizing their effort and the effort of their sellers. They don't allow themselves to be distracted by all the noise, right? And so I think part of the reason that some of these veterans kind of buy into it is because like, wait a minute, you're already doing a lot of this. Let's just reorient some of that effort you're already applying so that you get better, payback for that effort that you're applying. So again, a lot of it, very interestingly, is counterintuitive. Any other comments, Tarek, from your perspective on that?
Well, I would just say one of the things I love about this, and I think, Michelle, thank you for the intro earlier on. As you heard, I've spent a lot of time looking at and practicing sort of leadership practices, and they're not at all distinct from what we're talking about from a coaching perspective. For example, when you're talking about the focus in an interaction, in a coaching interaction, there's a lot of leadership principles that show that just being thoughtful and showing up to any meeting, very clear on what you want to achieve, and showing up even with a hypothesis, right? This is the framework I'm thinking about, right? Don't show up and hope magic happens. And so similarly with these coaching interactions, right, the magic is going to happen at the point of the coaching interaction. So the question is that how does a manager show up prepared? What objectives they want to come out? These things are all very much in line with proven leadership principles. They're being applied here, but I agree, the simplicity of focusing on what makes a good coaching interaction, and how do you measure and get better on that coaching interaction. That's what this is about. And like I said, it's not different than how we think about leadership. At the end of the day, it's about being prepared and an effective, interaction in leadership as well.
So you've told us a little bit about kind of the major drivers for why you wanted to work with sales managers. You talked about some of the criteria that you used to select VantagePoint, and again, we're very grateful that you did. Once you began to engage, once we started this whole process rolling, what were some of the critical success factors that both of you had in mind as you went through this engagement that kind of defined, yes, this is working, or no, this isn't working? And Jim, let's start with you.
Yeah, one of the key success factors to me was their engagement of the sales leaders early on in the process. And I found that to be something that really worked well for us, was from the very start saying, hey guys, we want to do a training session on how to be better leaders and how to draw more out of our teams to help them be the best they can be. And the early engagement with our data, with our team, really getting to understand the business of Ball. And I felt like that upfront work of just that early engagement to me was a huge success factor.
Okay, that alignment work, making sure that the elements of this engagement are aligned with your go-to-market, what you're looking to accomplish, all of that. How about Tarek? How about you? Any other critical success factors that you had?
Well, I do think if I can just go back to that simple 3-step framework, it was again aligning to that. So on the front end, how do you know whether people are excited, want to participate? Obviously, if they show up and participate and the leaders support that. Them actually engaging in the training, just were they engaged and did they take some of the modules coming out of that? But once again, I think the third part is by far the hardest, which is, okay, they came to the training, they said they want to be part of the program, they even took a couple of modules. Now, how the heck do you know whether they're actually doing this? And the second and third line managers are busy. They may or may not be inspecting to the level that they should. So I have to say that I don't, and I'm really interested in Jim's thoughts on this as well, but I don't think you can look at this as a black box or sort of a checkbox activity at all. This is a pretty big investment. And I'm not even talking about the money. I'm talking about like prioritizing this as one of the top things the organization is going to do. And in my case, I actually put my most tenured and skilled enablement person on my team on this piece of work. Almost like a large part of their plate was focused on this. This individual spent literally hundreds of hours over the last couple of years participating in all sorts of sessions with second line managers, with third line managers, checking in with people, helping to coach those coaches It was that work on a day-to-day basis that I really think made the program successful, beyond, the things, of course, that need to happen to, from a knowledge and et cetera perspective.
So that internal advocacy and attention, ongoing advocacy and attention, was a vital part of the success within Talend.
Yeah, and I don't, by the way, there was other things, of course. For example, the fact that our CRO was an advocate, the fact that the senior sales leader said the right things, but there's just no way you're going to get everybody to go from 0 to 60. Like, even if your organization says we want to do this, like any large scale change management program, you'll have people that will advocate. People will say the right things, but they're going to get busy and there's going to be other priorities. So I do feel that in addition to all of that, there has to be a practitioner, right? In my case, of course, I was behind it, but I actually had, like I said, the senior person on my team who was the person that passionately put in the time and was respected enough in the organization that people saw value in those interactions that they participated in.
Yeah, I talked with this person that you're referencing, and they said there was even examples of the coaching conversations that were put on your internal platform for people to use as best practice. So they actually took snippets of these coaching conversations between managers and sellers, as well as between second line and first line managers, and put them on a platform for other people to see. So you could share some of that. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jim, how about for you? This whole idea of internal advocacy, that's really been your primary role, hasn't it, Jim, within Ball? So tell us a little bit about how you've been able to kind of keep this alive and keep this moving.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about the engagement and the sustainment of the initiative is really important, that you not let that initial momentum, you have to build on the initial momentum. And I do think that that's been a huge part of the success factor with this program. With the keeping it up, I feel like we actually built a rhythm into our business. We have a process we call business review, and our business is seasonal, as gardening, as you can imagine. You garden in the spring, and then a lot of our cycle is built around that peak of seasonality of the home gardeners purchasing plants in the spring. So during our business review process, we actually brought in this framework into that business review, where prior to this, we used to have a budgeting process where we would say, okay, the company budget is 5% or 6%. And each of the meetings with the sales team would be, okay, how are you going to achieve 6%? How are you going to achieve 5%? And you basically get what you want to hear. Oh, 6% is the number. Here's how I'm going to do it. And what we've changed from this engagement is, what can your territory achieve? What business result can you achieve in your territory in this coming cycle? And that really sets that business result framework. And then we engage with that team one-on-one. Okay, well, what are the key milestones or key objectives in order for you to reach that business result? What do you need to do to meet those objectives? And through that framework, it's really kind of a one-pager that you develop in that business review process. And that one-pager becomes the guideposts for the follow-up conversations throughout the year. That becomes the framework for the coaching, for the engagement with that team member. Hey, you said you were going to get this. Now, have you done that? Have you done this part? How can I help you to do that? So we really took that framework and worked it into these business review process with each team member each year. And then that yearly document becomes the framework for the coaching conversations on a monthly, weekly, or bi-monthly, depending on the team member. That's really how it's come to life for us. And we've kept that business review process going now. I think we're going into our 6th year of the business review process in the spring of 23, planning for 24.
Excellent. So not only have you leveraged it to have better coaching conversations between managers and sellers, you've actually pulled it into your business planning cycle and creating clarity for how these objectives and results are going to be attained throughout the year. Excellent. So Tarek, we were talking a little bit about kind of critical success factors, and you talked a little bit about the importance of internal advocacy. Let's shift gears, if we could, a little bit now and talk about some of the hurdles that you face, right? One of the hurdles you already talked about, you said, getting people to actually do this when they're focused on other things requires a lot of internal advocacy. What other hurdles did you face throughout this process?
Well, I think so just to give a factor of scale, we by this year we'll probably put almost 100 managers through the program. So it's a pretty good scale now in terms of what we're talking about. But I think one of the some things to think about in terms of designing the program to be effective, and some of the things we had to answer was some of the sales roles, of course, that we have are directly responsible for driving revenue. And we have other roles that are, you can call them more support roles. They're customer facing, they don't carry a bag, etc. And thinking through how to roll out the program, get momentum, who comes in at what time, etc., was a hurdle that we overcame. We ended up mixing roles together and putting a lot of different roles into the program. And one of the learnings I think we have, and something I might share here in terms of some options to think through, is that those who had more traditional revenue roles report back a year later that it's the most effective for them. So one of the things that we have been thinking about as we move into the next cohort and the next set of managers is how we look at that. And that might mean, for example, does one think about revenue roles a little bit differently than support roles? Does it mean that you're going to do, kind of do a pilot and then roll other people into it? But I think the other thing is that I would say is this whole idea of opt-in, which is something that we've been thinking about across enablement. The old model is that, hey, we have this program and we're going to kind of beg you to be in it. We really want you to be in the program. But what we've been moving to much more is that we have this amazing program we're investing in. It's a mark of honor to be in this program. It's going to be, a feather in your cap. And as you know, Michelle, we actually worked to identify and brand a certification around this that folks could be really proud of and that would be announced in the organization. So configuring the program was, I don't know if it's a challenge or a hurdle, but it's definitely something to think about. I think we did well, but I think in the future, we'll probably even continue to tweak it a little bit more. We might do a little bit more thinking around revenue versus support roles. And we also might ask second or third line leaders to opt into the program or do certain things or make certain commitments to get this investment and be part of it. And part of the reason I say that is that the few outliers that I don't feel the program was as successful with were folks that went through it and then just didn't really engage, on the back end. And I'm sure Jim can attest to this. Every program we run is like that, right? There's always some outliers that don't engage. And so we're thinking a little bit differently about how do people opt into programs? How do they select programs? Do kind of step over a hurdle a little bit to be part of that program, because those are then the people that really invest personally in its success.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up, Tar, because we have other very large global clients that are shifting in that direction as well. They're not requiring that salespeople go through sales training. They're not requiring that sales managers go through sales management training. They're allowing them to opt in. And of course, there's lots of accolades and recognition and all of that for participating. But they're tired of using the stick. they're turning to the carrot instead. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key learnings. So again, we probably have folks that are, I know we have folks that are thinking about engaging with a sales manager training initiative. What were some of the things you learned by going through this that you wish you would have known when you started the process, that you think anybody who's listening in could benefit from, especially with this sort of engagement? So either one of you, whoever feels so moved.
I'm going to let Jim go.
All right, you go, Jim. Jim just froze. Jim, are you there? All right, well, Jim froze, so Tarek, I'm going to you.
Okay, all right. Well, one you've already, Jim, are you back? No, he's still frozen. All right, I'm going to definitely dive in then. One of the learnings you already alluded to, which is that how does this integrate with some of the other things that you're doing? It is sales methodology agnostic, but I think being thoughtful about what other programs and approaches you have in your organization and how they fit with that I think is extremely helpful. I think that one of the big learnings for me is the one that and that I would have probably been more thoughtful and more tightly integrated with is the one that Jim already talked about, and that's the planning on the front end. When you're doing account and territory planning on the front end and setting those plans as Jim described, the coaching is such a good and natural fit with that. Because of the fact that we didn't align as tightly with that, it tended to be a little bit more disparate. And I wouldn't say tactical, but each manager sort of saying, you know, well, here's kind of the activities that matter most to me. Right. But what did you depend on to make your number from the beginning of the year? What did you build in from a plan perspective? That being said, we're now making that alignment more tightly as we roll into out years. So I do think that learning and the thing that Jim talked about, which he's got multiple years in doing, is one that I could have thought more tightly about from the beginning. That's a good learning.
Did we lose Jim?
There
There
he
he is. He's back.
Yeah, I think I'm back. I guess.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
So,
apologize
Jim,
for that slight mix up there. Sorry
no
about that.
worries, no worries. We're just glad you're back. We were just talking about some of the key learnings, Jim, and Tarek shared with us a little bit about, what he would probably have done differently, if he had it to do over again. What would what were some of the key learnings you had that would impact maybe a change in how you might do this moving forward?
Yeah, a couple things. I think key learnings for me, the importance of leading indicators of success happening. So often in sales, we get used to measuring, in the rear view mirror, looking at sales and bookings or checking margin, looking at the result that was, instead of looking at the result that will be. So developing leading indicators that success are the right things happening at the right time to lead to a positive outcome, for me, is a huge learning, especially in a seasonal business. That became really crucial to me. The other part, I think, is the importance of really it comes down to the urgent and the important. And so often the urgent displaces the important, but really taking that time during that time of the year when we have time, when the urgent isn't burying us, to make sure that we focus on the important and to take that time to develop those key results, develop the objectives, identify the high impact activities, identify what it's going to take, who's going to do it and when, and really make that plan. And make the plan, work the plan, and take the time to make the plan. And it just helps drive. That to me was a huge takeaway.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that idea of you can't manage results. You can worry about them. You can measure them, but you can't manage them, right?
Yes.
Of course, people, when they do these kind of initiatives, they want to accomplish some good outcome, right? There's a result they're looking to accomplish, whether that's an efficiency measure, whether that's a revenue measure, whatever that is. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the key impacts and results. I mean, either one, like you can talk about behavioral impact, you can talk about cultural impact, you can talk about results, and how they move. I'd like to hear a little bit of that from each of you. So, Tarek, why don't we start with you? What were some of the biggest impacts you saw from this work?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll just say, I'll cut to the chase and I'll say that overall, almost every manager who went through the program saw an impact on their ability to coach better. And I would even categorize it as excellently, which is sort of the way that we coded things when we went back to look at results. As I mentioned earlier, there were only a couple of outliers. There were folks that didn't generally engage in the program. And I think this is very interesting. They tended to be the managers who, even before the program, were rated more poorly by their teams on coaching.
Oh, wow.
So that was interesting. And really, therefore, what I saw was managers going from good coaches to great coaches or being great more consistently. So I'd love to share two perspectives. One is I'd love to share a couple examples of what our leaders told us, and I'd like to give some examples from different, kind of parts of the globe. So from Europe, first of all, I just want to say that we had this very respected leader who said that he thought this was the best program he ever saw run in his career, which echoes sort of some of that 35-year tenured manager that Jim talked about. But specifically because he believed with the accountability and focus, it was much easier to get a clear read on where we were with deals. So yes, we have Salesforce and all of that, but people sometimes like to present what they want to present around a deal. And there wasn't a mechanism to unbundle that and have a consistent vocabulary and framework to ask people what was happening and what did they plan to do next. And with that sort of in hand, just the ability to have a firmer grasp on where my deals are as a manager, even from a forecasting perspective, he really pointed to that as a huge help. And also helping his teams qualify in or out faster on deals as a result was a huge win.
Okay.
The second example was a manager who admittedly said, I don't really love lots of frameworks and, you know, sort of discipline in how I do things. But this is a manager from Asia who said, but being kind of forced to use this focused approach actually helped me be much more proactive in how I think about doing things. So anecdotally, they felt like it was really helpful. And finally, a manager in North America who I would characterize as being very enthusiastic about coaching and sales manager programs and liked by their team. They actually, I was amazed to see the before and after on the way their team talked about them. They actually doubled the number of people on their team who rated their coaching as excellent. And also had a significant increase in those who rated their time spent coaching as excellent. So that's a great example of a good to great, a person who just with the tools and with the focus converted sort of the other half of their team to say, oh, now you know you're an excellent rated coaching. So I've got some specific numbers, I can share those, but I thought I'd start with some of the anecdotal things.
Yeah,
and
that's interesting.
After Jim, come back and share more.
Yeah. So it's so fascinating that you bring that up as an example, the whole idea of going from, you know, half your team thinks you're a good coach to now your whole team thinks you're a good coach. I'm going to share a really quick story because I think it might spark some additional conversation. We had a situation where we were working with GE, one of their divisions. And we work with the sales management team, not the salespeople, just the sales management team. And before we started working with them, they had put their sales managers through 5 different coaching programs over a 4-year period. And they did a survey and they asked the sellers, rate your coaching. How much coaching you're getting and how good is your coaching? And more than half the sellers rated they got almost no coaching. This was after 5 courses on how to coach, right? And so they said, we don't know what's going on here, right? We're training these people how to coach. We're videotaping them. We're audio taping them. We're training them to death. And yet their people aren't seeing coaching. And I think the reason is because what you just talked about, Tarek, is you don't have to do more coaching. You just have to do better coaching. You have to coach the right things in the right way at the right time. And that's what salespeople find to be valuable.
Well, it's really just a simple one was that I also just think is a really cool example of how blocking and tackling this can be. A lot of people were just saying, my manager doesn't coach me consistently, right? Like they don't have a cadence. They don't have a time that they do. We don't have a standard agenda. We know this, right? We come in and talk. Now things were very different. That's what I talked about, that leadership preparation idea before, right? Which is come in, I know I'm going to do this. They ask me these questions. In the beginning, it might seem rigorous and confining, but we've seen when sellers come to understand and expect that's what's going to happen. That's what changed people to saying, hey, they're excellent. They're excellent on consistency. They're excellent as coaches because now there was a framework. It wasn't just what we wanted to talk about today. That could be anything.
Yeah. It adds some consistency and some predictability to it.
Yeah, predictability.
Yeah. Jim, how about from your perspective? What were some of the biggest impacts that you saw within Ball?
Yeah, one of the biggest impacts was a common language around our account planning. So we work with a lot of strategic partners on building our customers' production plans, and being able to develop this common language is super important. I found that to be something that was really important. Another big outcome for us was related to succession planning. We were facing a lot of retirements in our sales force. We had about 25% of our team that was going to retire within 3 years. And so this importance of developing a framework for bringing new team members on board and then helping to bring them up the curve quickly. And so that was a really important outcome of the engagement, because our managers, the sales leaders, instead of leading a team of veterans, now they're starting to have these really new team members out there in the field, and having this framework to help to coach them, to help bring them along faster and shorten that learning curve for the new team members. So succession planning and the effectiveness of that was a really important outcome for us.
Excellent. Excellent. Anything else, Tark, that you wanted to share? I know you had some other examples.
Well, I just wanted to build on that and say, I think also retention and stability in our manager roles has definitely improved since we did the coaching program. I think you can see more unity in each of the manager teams across the globe. So I think that's been positive as well. But no, I was just going to share a couple of things. One of the things I also liked about VPP, about your approach, was that there was a planned way that we were going to measure ROI. We had some things, as Jim talked about, in terms of indicators, but there was also, we're going to ask sellers, and I thought that was really interesting, to apply how the coaching impacted their deals. And so just to share a couple of things is that we were able to calculate an ROI, which was super helpful in the organization. And we were able to track, roughly $9 million of revenue. And that was using a fairly conservative method of attribution, which I won't get into here. We were also able to share back to the team in my opinion, unexpected and very positive outcome, which was that when we looked at the rate of coaches who are now coaching at the effective level after the program, the percentage that we looked at, VPP and the organization we work with was able to share with us that had moved us just into the class of a sort of best in class. And the way that our managers and our organization internalized that to hear it, I don't think they expected it either. There was a level of pride that we're actually, if we adhere to this program and continue to use it consistently, are using, and can be viewed as using a best in class manager coaching approach. That's amazing for folks to hear and to have that backed up by numbers. So those were just a few. There's lots and lots of things we learned through that process of looking at our ROI, but those are a couple of headlining things that were pretty cool.
Excellent. So we're coming close to the close of our session. We got a few more minutes. I'm gonna ask for some questions and answer sessions. Maybe have a few closing comments, but are there any other things you wanted to share about this experience working with sales managers and leaders that you think people that are tuning into this should know about? Maybe that I haven't asked you about. Other insights, other thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I think one of the things I would add is you get out of it what you put into it. As a sales leader considering this program, you be prepared to engage. Get your data ready, get prepared to work with the VantagePoint team, because you get out of it what you put into it as the sales leader and for your participants, but really engage with it, I think, is a really important factor. The other part for me was we actually had to increase our number of sales managers, because we had basically our span of coverage was too wide. So I had one manager, he had 22 team members.
Wow.
And so the reality of trying to coach effectively on a effective rhythm was nearly impossible with that. So we actually expanded the number of managers in order to reduce the number of team members per manager. So that was an important outcome. And I think the financial results also really important to consider. Like, was this a good investment for Ball? And I would say absolutely. If you look at the top line results, the impact on our margin percent, it absolutely paid for itself very quickly. It was a good use of our time, a good use of our dollars, and has really been an effective engagement over what we're now going into. Like, I think it's our 6th year of working on different aspects of the VantagePoint program with our team across North America.
Excellent. Thank you. Tark, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple of tips, especially for those that are moving more into tactically, building a case for doing this and setting up their program. I have 2 additional thoughts. One is that whether you use VPP or not, ask your organization to make a multi-year investment. I really think the worst situation you want to be in is you do all of this work to set it up, to get advocacy, to get the program going, and then in year 2, you can't do any more cohorts, you can't license the IP. If your organization is serious about this, I believe they should at least make a 2-year commitment, and you should say that that's necessary or longer in running the program. The second thing I'd say is if you're looking for evidence as to shift investment into manager coaching, because usually the thing it's competing with is some sort of training, right? Is that I was very impressed with some stats I saw from Forrester and talked to them about, which is that, and we all know that live training people only retain 10% and all of that, but what was really cool is they showed that high performing sellers actually prefer and rate learning from their managers and peers higher than even training. So, and people don't necessarily know how to harness that, right? It's like, okay, well, I guess when they talk to their manager, they'll learn something. So this is not just a program for coaching on deals. It's a way for your sellers to learn on the job day to day, which they say is how they prefer to learn. So it's a pretty cool way to harness that. I think that might help in building your case as well.
Yeah, excellent point. That's an excellent tip. And I think you all have given them many excellent tips along the way. Some of the hurdles that you overcame, some of the impacts that you've seen, some of the extra effort that you had to apply along the way. I'm going to actually offer it up for questions. Do we have any questions in the chat, Lisa or Michelle, that people would like to have answered? Let's see.
Done right now, Michelle.
Okay, all right. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have just a couple of other points to share before we close our session with our excellent panelists. We do have an upcoming opportunity for those of you who might be a smaller company who want a few of your sales managers to attend. Ball Horticulture is having another sales management coach session in April, and they've allowed us to open this up for people outside of Ball if they want to attend. So here's the dates, April 26th and 27th in West Chicago. The cost per participant, you can contact Barbara Dews at VantagePoint for more information. So for anyone who's interested in sending a couple of managers to a session, we almost never do this. It's kind of a rare thing to have happen. So if you want to take advantage of that. The next thing is some actions you can take. You can pre-order the Sales Agility Code, which actually outlines all of our research around agility throughout the sales force for sales managers and salespeople. You can download some information about our training solutions, and you can also visit our website. So you'll be getting these slides as a follow-up to this session. And let me sincerely thank both of our panelists today. Tara, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your knowledge and insights. And Jim, all the great work you've done within Ball. You've been a treasure trove of information for the folks on this webcast. So thanks so much for your participation. Take care, folks.
Thank you all.
Take care.